Dear BalkanPod listeners, I'm Dilek from Turkey. This part, we're gonna talk about upcoming election in Bulgaria, which is also crucial for Turkey. My guest is Mr. Stefan Tafrov, who was the Permanent Representative of Bulgaria to the United Nations almost 9 years. He is very prominent and well-known diplomat in Bulgaria, and now he is a candidate of Democratic Bulgaria. He works together with the opposition leader Hristo Ivanov to win election. Let's see what he says about the recent developments in Bulgaria. Dear Tafrov, welcome to BalkanPod.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's really an honor for me to host you here as my guest, so I hope my question will not be difficult for you.
I hope too, but I'm ready.
That's great. Maybe this question can be odd, but do you think that the coalition government will change after the election? Because I frequently follow up-to-date opinion polls, and I see head-to-head race between BSP and GERB for taking first place in the election. What are the possibilities about the new government of Bulgaria?
Oh, it is very hard to tell at this juncture because people are very dissatisfied with the political parties which are now present in parliament, including the ruling party of Mr. Borisov, GERB, and its so-called opposition, the socialists, which is a very weak opposition. There are also a lot of discontent with the Movement for Rights and Freedom and the coalition partner of so-called Patriot, which, by the way, disintegrated for these elections. They are running separately. There are three parties and they are running separately from each other. So all this is causing a lot of confusion. And of course, the protests against the government, which were massive last year, especially in the summer, are a major factor, and a lot of people don't see themselves represented in present parliament and they want to change.
From outside, I see people's anger or fury towards the 11-year-old governance of Borisov is growing. As you mentioned, there is also protests which continue in Bulgaria. This fury actually because of corruption, unemployment, economic crisis, populist policies, etc. But on the other hand, he's still so strong political figure in Bulgaria. How do you explain this paradox in Bulgarian public?
Well, his standing is very diminished, I have to say. So I don't expect him to become once again prime minister, to be honest. I can't see how he can garner the support of enough political forces in the next parliament to stay on as prime minister. There is a lot of resentment against him personally because he's a populist leader. Of course, he appeals to the public by his, macho style, talking, by the fact that he follows the public sentiment of every issue. He avoids any controversial decisions and trying to please the public. But of course, in the long run, people are realizing that he actually lacks consistency. He's a typical populist leader. So this is the explanation. But now with the loss of Trump in America, you can tell that everywhere around the world, these kind of populist leaders are less successful than they used to be. So I don't think that Bulgaria will be a major difference in this regard.
And my another question will be about region. What are the purpose of Bulgaria blocking for the first time North Macedonia's integration with the EU? As far as I'm concerned, it has affected negatively the internal politics in Bulgaria. And indeed, I have some prediction, but I'm very curious to hear your opinion as a very popular person who represents Bulgaria in international organization. And what will happen to this particular issue?
Well, the fact is that, Bulgaria and Macedonia reached friendship treaty, which was an important milestone a few years ago. But the current government, Borisov, didn't do anything to really have the conversation with our Macedonian neighbors about the issues at stake for Bulgarians. Many Bulgarians have problems with the Macedonian identity, with history issues and so on. And this conversation was never never held. It started to take place only a little bit before this decision regarding the negotiations of Macedonia, and it was too late for this to give some result. So the general sentiment among Bulgarians is that Northern Macedonia is a country that is basically quite trying to manipulate our common history and so on, and Bulgarians are very emotional about that. So, which explains why the decision of the government is supported generally. But the problem is that the strategic interest of both Bulgaria and Northern Macedonia, and the region indeed, is that the Western Balkans, Northern Macedonia included, should become part of the European Union. So we are now at a dead end, which is a dangerous one. And I believe that very concrete measures, step by step, should be taken to restore the confidence between the two countries and between the people. Because we can tell that after what you mentioned, very negative emotions were at display both in Macedonia and Bulgaria, even insults and so on. This is not good climate for cooperation and for good neighborhood. This has to stop. We need to calm down and to look pragmatically to what we can do to achieve a real cooperation and give future to our citizens. I believe that, of course, the issues we Bulgarians might have with the Macedonians regarding history have to be solved progressively, and very frank conversation is needed, which should not, though, encourage those that Northern Macedonia that really hate Bulgaria, because there are such people, to continue with their anti-Bulgarian campaign, which is there. Both, also in Bulgaria, we have to demonstrate we care for the Macedonians. We care for this country. We are very close to it. We met with you in Macedonia at a conference, and every time I go there, I feel emotional. I feel close to the country as Bulgarian. Because the language, I don't need interpreters, of course. People are very friendly with me, and I feel really very warm in Macedonia. I love Macedonia. I think that this should be something, these positive feelings should lead the way to resolve those problems, and not the negative feelings, not the hatred, not the insults, but this natural warmth which exists between us.
I see. The Poland and Hungary, European Union has many problems with these countries. Do you think that Bulgaria is located itself between democratic values and Poland and Hungary's values or something like that?
Absolutely. Not Bulgaria, but Borisov. These are two different things. Okay. When we say Poland, we say Kaczynski. When we say Hungary, we mean Orban. And when we say Bulgaria, we mean Borisov. These are populist leaders speculating all issues that are dear to populists. The difference between Borisov and Orban and Kaczynski is that Borisov doesn't contradict, the big players in the European Union, Germany especially, Merkel, but also France and others. While, of course, Orban and Kaczynski are openly anti-European. Borisov is more cunning. The deal between him and, for instance, Merkel, more or less, is I will support you on everything at the European stage, and they need the Bulgarian support because at different European institutions, the vote of every country, each country is needed. But you will leave me alone to do whatever I want at home. You want to blame me for my populist and anti-democratic policies back home, for the lack of rule of law. It was the deal for long years. Now, though, it is starting to unravel. This deal is starting to unravel because things have gone too far. And the protests last year in Bulgaria, they were widely reported on the European press, and they were not favorable to Borisov. And of course, politicians in the rest of the European Union are reading those articles, their voters are reading them, and now our friends in the rest of the European Union are learning the real situation in Bulgaria, and this is not good. For instance, as you know, the main problem of Bulgaria is the fact that the rule of law principle is not applied. There are many problems regarding our judiciary. And for instance, these last days, literally, to give you an example, Laura Kövesi, the new European prosecutor, has disapproved 7 out of the Bulgarian candidates to join her office, the prosecutors, because she doesn't like the quality. The Bulgarian High Judicial Council, which is the body largely responsible for the dire state of the Bulgarian judiciary. So these candidates, 7 of these candidates, were not approved by Laura Kövesi. And now the Prosecutor General, Mr. Ivan Geshev, who was one of the targets of the protest, who is still one of the targets of this protest, is in very bad state. So you see that this long-standing deal between Borisov and the rest of what we call in Bulgaria the captured state and powerful politicians in the EU is about to get problematic. So this is a new development, which was not there until last year.
Thank you. This brave answer to me. Let's talk a little bit about the Turkish population living in Bulgaria, the citizens of Bulgaria. Actually, in my opinion, Turks are an integral part of Bulgaria, but many of them actually complain about their living standards. I mean, many of them are poor and they have a number of infrastructure problems, education, unemployment problems, etc. Do you think the living conditions of Turks are equal and good in Bulgaria? And what kind of solution you have for this issue?
Now, let me say that one of the worst crimes of the communist regime in Bulgaria, among so many, was the persecution of Bulgarian citizens of Turkish origin, of the Bulgarian Turks. They represent, 8% of the population, something like that, at least, and have always been loyal citizens to Bulgaria. They started changing forcefully their names. In the 80s, actually, I joined public life in a way under communism by signing petitions protesting those policies, which were disgusting, of Zhivkov and so on. You are maybe young, but you don't. But 300,000 Bulgarian Turks had to leave their homes, go to Turkey, and so on and so forth. Bulgaria lost them. This is human capital, very precious. So I'm personally very, very close to this issue. And then after Zhivkov and communism fell, we all thought that our citizens of Turkish origin, the Bulgarian Turks, will become immediately a political force which will help, the Bulgarian new democracy and will help to solve their social problems you are mentioning, which are real, which are very, very important. It didn't happen because in the 90s, the forces of the previous regime were still very strong, and especially the secret services, and they formed the Movement for Rights and Freedom, which actually which speculated over the fears of the Turks that might be persecuted again, wrongly, because the first thing democracy in Bulgaria did was to apologize to the Turks, to restore their life. And a very small group in that party really captured the authority in this party, and it became part of this scheme of corruption nationally. That very small elite became very rich, while ordinary Turks, while supporting them, stayed poor. So this is what happened. And by the way, the protests in Bulgaria started when the leader of my party, Hristo Ivanov, appeared on a beach near Burgas on the Black Sea coast, where the residence of the historic leader of this Movement for Rights and Freedom, Ahmed Dogan, who is notorious for his corruption, was built, by the way, illegally. And of course, it was supported by Borisov for this. Their cooperation is not a secret for anyone, in spite of the fact that on paper, the Movement for Rights and Freedom is in opposition. That sparked the protest, and I was there when Mr. Dogan and the rest of the, leadership of the Movement for Rights and Freedom brought many Turks from inside Bulgaria, allegedly, to protest to this action. And there were supporters, but what happened was very telling, because these people saw the luxury of in which lived Mr. Dogan. I was there, I saw that. They were, shocked. And also they didn't see we had been portrayed as, nationalists. We want to, dismantle the rights of the Turks in Bulgaria. Not at all. At some point, the two groups, we were singing the national anthem. because they didn't see any enemies in ourselves. We are brothers. We want the same thing. We want Bulgaria to be a developed country, to every Bulgarian citizen to be respected and to have equal rights. We want our brothers from the Turkish community to be fully integrated. We want economic development from the areas where they live. So this was I have to say that it was a very moving moment when we started chanting the national anthem, all of us. And that was the start of the protests, and which lasted for several months in the Bulgarian city.
It's really great story, so thank you for this. You know, in recent years, Prime Minister Boyko Borisov and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have cultivated a unique and very good relationship on energy issue, refugee issue, etc. Furthermore, a few times, Borisov has positioned himself in favor of Turkey in the EU against some criticism about Turkey. How election drive two countries' relations?
Listen, Bulgaria has to have good relations with Turkey because it's our neighbor. Also, as I mentioned, many now Turks living in Turkey have actually strong connections to Bulgaria. They are very, especially in cities like Bursa and others, but also Istanbul. And this is a natural bridge between our two countries. We need good relations, and I think. But of course, Bulgaria, as member of the European Union, should also regard Turkey in its entirety. And when there are people that feel persecuted by Mr. Erdogan and they seek political asylum in Bulgaria, they, if eligible according to international and Bulgarian law, they should receive such a treatment because Bulgaria is a member of the European Union and should obey international law and European regulations. Borisov, in order to please Mr. Erdogan, very often deported those people back to Turkey where they suffered persecutions. And my political party is very much against these policies. But yes, Bulgaria, our policy is yes, good relations with Turkey, but on a principle basis, on the basis of respect for human rights.
Lastly, I would like to hear your words as a candidate of Democratic Bulgaria. How you decided to be candidate in this party, and what kinds of change you believe this party will do for Bulgaria?
Well, I decided because I have been involved in politics with Da Bulgaria, which is a coalition of parties. It's one of the three parties that make yes, which means yes, Bulgaria. Okay, and Hristo Ivanov is our leader, who is now very popular in Bulgaria, by the way. So I was there, a candidate of Yes Bulgaria at parliamentary elections in 2017, then at the European elections. So I'm a member of the leadership of Yes Bulgaria, and it was a natural choice for myself. What we want, we have a very detailed program, very positive program for Bulgaria and for the Balkans, by the way, based on the restoration of the principle of rule of law. That's very important because in Bulgaria we have problems with the judiciary, as I mentioned, but also modernization of the country, digitalization of for instance, of all spheres of life, administration, and so on and so forth. So very firmly to establish the role of Bulgaria within two institutions, international organizations we are member, and two families, I would say, that are essential for our well-being, for our national security, meaning the European Union and NATO. So these are and of course, last but not least, to the human capital of Bulgaria is something we cherish, we want to develop, we want to help the young, bright people to stay in Bulgaria, not to go elsewhere and make their lives there, but to stay in Bulgaria and contribute to the national well-being.
Dear Mr. Tafrov, thank you very much to share your time with us. It was great conversation for me. I learned a lot, and I don't want to say goodbye, but it's time to finish. So I would like to say goodbye for now.
Thank you, dear Dilek. So this was really a pleasure for me, and it was so nice to get in touch with you after we met in Macedonia. Thank you.
Dear listeners, see you next week, same day and same time.